There is the total disregard for the rule of law. You spoke about impunity earlier. There are many who blame this on a very weak judicial system, or even perhaps a compromised judicial system. I'm not a lawyer. You are. You're not just a lawyer, you have been Attorney General at a time when you were easily the most visible and the most active in that role. We hear judges make a pronouncement stopping another court from hearing a matter. We hear judges making a pronouncement stopping the police from investigating someone. We hear judges making a pronouncement asking for a stay in a court process. Given, as many believe, that if you're going to deal with corruption, you're going to have a partner in the judicial system. What is the game plan? And perhaps, as a lawyer, how do you feel when the judge says to a policeman, don't investigate this man, and that remains the case for years?
Yeah. Well, I actually thought it was going to be a dialogue.
We're dialoguing.
It's now okay. Well, let me say first that it's a matter of great concern, for me as a lawyer, and as you can imagine for, all of us. But I want to emphasize that a lot of what is wrong with so many different aspects of governance, so many aspects of the system. And the judiciary is just part of the problem, But just coming back to the point, if you look at some of these decisions that you've referred to, many of them are obviously wrong. It's not they're not decisions that anyone is in doubt about. They're obviously wrong. So you see that where, for example, anyone, it is said concerning a decision is made that somebody should not be investigated in perpetuity. Obviously, there's something wrong with that. And you don't need much to say that there's something wrong with that. But having said so, we also have a constitution which allows an independent judiciary and which enjoins us to respect the decisions of the courts unless they are appealed. And that's as it should be. But I think that what we must do in terms of reform is in being able to identify specific cases of wrongdoing and reporting those cases of wrongdoing and going through the whole process of finding out why those decisions were made, and if they were made wrongly, then there ought to be consequence for those decisions. And that's really the way it should be. Sometimes in legal process, there's a tendency to say, well, the decision was wrong, but it's not necessarily perfidious. It's not necessarily it's not necessarily motivated by any corrupt thinking or corrupt actions, But it was a wrong decision, right? And so that's why you have the appeal process. So we also have to distinguish between where a decision is wrong, because of a failure in the reasoning process or whatever it is, and where it's obviously motivated by some misconduct. And those that are motivated by misconduct have to be reported. We have to go through the entire mill. Fortunately, we have an atmosphere now and where the judiciary, the executive are at one in saying that we must fight corruption. The Chief Justice of Nigeria has said repeatedly that he is not going to accept or tolerate corruption in any way in the judiciary. And we have seen recently, especially in some of the actions he's taken, that he's serious about that. And I think that is a dialogue that all arms of government ought to have. It's a dialogue we had in Lagos in 1999, where we actually sat down and said, look, if you have a system, if you have a judicial system that is untrustworthy, and you are the commercial nerve center of the country, you are not going to make progress anyway, and nobody's going to trust your decisions. It's just not going to work. That's the sort of dialogue that we are initiating now at the federal level. All of us must come together and talk through this and put in place a system that works for us. You see, I don't think the judiciary itself, and when you look at the large numbers of judges across the country, the majority of them are honest men and women doing their work correctly, and they are not, and you don't find outrageous decisions in most of the courts of the land. But I think that it is important for even those who are doing so well to see that wrongful conduct will not be tolerated. And that's why these dialogues are important. Every one of us must accept that you can't run a functional economy with a judiciary whose decisions can be weird or inconsistent, or simply outrageous. You have to have a judiciary that's predictable in outcomes, because the law is supposed to introduce predictability to outcomes. So I think it's a dialogue that needs to be had, and we've initiated that already with the judiciary. We intend to talk, to keep working together to ensure that we're able to clean up the judiciary and administration of justice system generally. But it's going to take, it's going to take a while. Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Your Excellency. One of the major issues for us in our deliberations is the issue of the young Nigerian, because if you look at the demography, obviously about 65% of our population falls under 40, and the largest level of unemployment is within that level. But what I think, or what we think has actually made the position worse is even the structure of our educational system, as it leads to the great unemployment that we have. Right now, we have, because we've placed such great value on education, especially in certain parts of the country, every family has a major aspiration for every child to go up to university education. Unfortunately, we're not creating enough jobs. And two, in the structure of an economy, you don't need everybody to be a graduate. But the way our educational system is structured right now, that's the only option. And society makes you feel like something is wrong if you don't have that. The side effect of that as well for us is when we're making investments in like construction industry and all of that, we're creating jobs, but Nigerians can't take the job because they don't have the right skills. They haven't been structured to take pride in certain levels and be able to walk into those sectors. So we're creating jobs for citizens from the West Coast and not our own people. Now, are we going to bite the bullet and totally look at our educational structure and tear it apart and rebuild it in a way that we have the different outlets within our educational system that allows people to exit at different levels in order for us to be able to feed people into the jobs at different levels without everybody getting through to the university stage?
First, if you look at the educational plan, our educational plan is quite is one that is quite revolutionary in the sense that we've identified some of the problems that you have mentioned. And really, for me, I think when you look at the way that education has gone, it is so tragic. And it goes beyond just equipping people or not being able to equip young people for jobs or anything. It is as bad in many parts of the country and worse in some, where people are not even able to read or write, and that really is a major problem. Some of what we see is, sometimes you look at a situation and you say to yourself, well, where do you start from? Because some of it is really quite bad. You have 10.4 million children out of school, so they're not even within the system at all. And we've been to places where I've seen adults who even in writing in the local language cannot even write, let alone write in any other language of communication and all that. So we really have a problem. And I think that the way that we are trying to work through this is, first of all, to recognize that the first level is increasing investment in education, because we have to deal with so many different problems. There are places where education has completely collapsed, and for instance, in the Northeast, in the past 6 years or so, many schools have